people want to consume content in different formats. So if people really, want to have a physical book, they'll get your book. If people want to have an ebook, well, the ebook is available too. If people want to watch like a long format video, like a series of you talking about your houseplants, then that's where the online course is. Whereas if people, want just your free content, but they don't mind small little bite-sized things, then, you have YouTube channel, right? So having yourself on all these different formats is sort of like giving people the most options to find you and interact with your content.
Hey friends, it's Haley from Team Teachable. If you've ever been curious about what it's like to make a major career switch, you won't want to miss today's episode. Meet Darryl Cheng. He's an engineer turned plant expert and entrepreneur. In today's episode, you'll hear all about Darryl's business journey, how he scaled his now thriving online business that teaches people how to care for their plants, and so much more. Let's say hello to Darryl.
Welcome to Everything is Teachable, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes to learn how everyday creators have transformed their skills and passions into online courses and businesses.
Darryl Cheng is the creator of the incredibly popular blog and Instagram account Houseplant Journal. Darryl's passion for plants and engineering approach have turned him into one of the most trusted resources of the internet houseplant world. What was initially a hobby Tumblr page has turned into an Instagram account with over 500,000 followers, a foundational houseplant care book entitled The New Plant Parent, a game-changing online course, and plant time-lapse videos that have gone viral around the world. Hi, Darryl. How are you doing today?
Hi, how are you? I'm good.
I'm great. I'm so happy that you are on today. It's such a pleasure, and I'm really excited to chat all about you and your business.
Thank you.
Yes, let's go ahead and get started. I would love to just know more about you and what you did before starting Houseplant Journal.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Darryl Cheng. Before doing Houseplant Journal, I was in software engineering. So my background is engineering, and then I worked at a software company. And, while I was there, I still living at home because I was, saving up for my first kind of apartment. And my mom said, Darryl, maybe you should help me decorate the house with some houseplants. But she also added, you need to figure out how to take care of them because she claimed to be bad with plants. Now, this was confusing to me because she taught me how to do outdoor gardening and she seemed pretty good at it. So I was wondering, what could be so hard about or different about indoor plants? So I just bought a bunch of plants and tried to Google the information. And when you sort of see the same patterns of the ways that people explain things about, especially with houseplant care, I was just like, well, I didn't really feel like this was precise enough or very helpful. It was often really vague. So I just decided I would start Houseplant Journal just really, really simply on Tumblr, actually, just documenting what I was doing with plants. And that's how Houseplant Journal began.
Oh, that's amazing. So would you say your passion for plants kind of started because of your mother, and then the more you learned about it, the more interested you became, or was it something that's kind of been around for a long time?
Well, I mean, I always loved walking around my garden, like my parents' garden, and then just looking at the ways that the plants grow. And I think a lot of gardeners can attest to springtime being their favorite time when everything starts to come out of their winter dormancy, right? And so just getting to witness that in my garden was always nice. So then naturally when we started having plants in the house, the so-called house plants, then I was experiencing the same thing where I would see, oh, new growth, that's really cool. But I think what happened was, I think a lot of times when you read online about houseplants, it's more often a sort of sense of doom and despair, why that's, or a lot of mystery as to why is this happening? Oh, what's this leaf yellowing? It could be this, could be that. And I don't know, I think it felt like the narrative was always just doom and gloom when it came to houseplants. And I just wanted to share that it's not all bad. It's these things happen, but also lots of new cool things happen. And so just being able to incorporate also my photography into the telling of, okay, what's happening with my plants and show it in a nice way. I mean, that's sort of what made it perfect for Instagram.
Oh, definitely. And I'm sure also like you said, taking your photography and kind of showing each step of the process makes it really accessible and relatable. And people who are becoming plant parents for the first time can take a look at this and be like, okay, I feel good about where I'm at in my plant journey. So
Hmm.
that's really great to do that.
Yeah, I think one really critical thing that's different about how we take care of houseplants now versus decades ago, when most of our parents and grandparents had probably some houseplants. But what is different now is social media and the fact that we all mostly have very accessible and good cameras, right? Which means no longer are we just hearing tales of yellowing leaves and oh no, maybe I overwatered the plant, but rather, well, now we can document it and say like what's actually happening with my plant. And I think that's on the sort of like diagnosing negative side, but on the positive side, now we can share the little joys that we see. Like I'm looking across the table here and I see a new leaf coming out, and that brings me so much joy, and I can take a picture and share it with the world. And I think then we kind of share, I guess, a more faceted approach to houseplant care, seeing that it's not all just what's this problem, how do I fix this, what am I doing wrong, but rather give them a good enough environment, kind of accept that plants don't always have to look perfect, and you'll also get to witness these little moments of joy.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the visual journey I feel like is so critical for something like this. And I
Mm,
completely relate because I actually bought a mini monstera about 2 months ago, and
nice.
I've seen so much growth. And now I have another new leaf that's coming in. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but this particular leaf has one of the holes in it
Oh
that
yes,
the
yes.
bigger monsteras have. So I just discovered this the other day, and I am absolutely thrilled. So thrilled. So just all that to say, everyone experiences that joy, and it's so awesome to be able to share that with
Hmm.
other people.
For sure. And I was going to say too, like that feeling of like, so for example, for you with the mini monstera, like those little holes and little cuts on the side, they're called fenestrations. And
Okay.
it is really like, I don't know if you've played Pokemon, but like when your
Yeah.
Pokemon levels up and it evolves into the next evolution, that's happening with a lot of plants all the time, right? Which is
Okay.
especially this group of plants called aeroids, like pothos, monstera, anthuriums. Like they grow leaf and then it reaches like a kind of maximum size. And then the next one, if the previous conditions were really favorable, then the next leaf will kind of exhibit more complexity. So for monstera, that would be fenestrations. For anthuriums, it's like lots of patterns on their leaves. And it's just like you get to witness this right in front of you, right? So it's
Right.
such a joy. And again, with social media, like you can share this. And now when I share, for example, my monstera, like the huge one, people are like, well, how did you get your leaves so big? And then I just say, well, no, it's not necessarily me doing it. It's just I've had this plant for X number of years.
Hmm.
And then it's sort of like it helps to give people more realistic expectations about how their plants will grow, right? Because
Right.
without seeing what other people might or might not have, then we just kind of maybe stick on our own idea that so-called proper care will give you perfect plants forever. But then the moment something different happens, it's like, oh, it's not perfect, therefore something must be wrong, and we might then beat ourselves up and say, oh no, I'm killing it or it's dying or something like that, right? But I think it's important to share like what the real experience looks like with plants, and that is, yes, cutting off yellowed leaves every week. I'm cutting, like, because I have hundreds of plants, like
Right.
every week I'm cutting off yellowed leaves, like on maybe 10 or 20 of my plants, and that's just part of the cycle, right? And if we say that, then for someone else who maybe has their plants for the first time, when that happens inevitably, then they won't be so disappointed and they'll realize, oh, this is just part of the process, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. It's so great. And it helps create such a tight-knit community, which we'll definitely jump into more later.
Hmm.
But I want to hear more about the very early days of Houseplant Journal. So you said that you started on Tumblr. What was kind of your strategy there? Is that where you started more of your blogging and just sharing pictures?
Mhm.
Was it really just a way for you to just get out there a little bit more?
Well, so Tumblr, when I first started, I decided I wanted to document my plants, right? And
Right.
it was a matter of keeping it like a, as redundant as this sounds, a houseplant journal, right?
Right,
So,
right.
so like, I wanted it to be online. So when I was kind of like surveying the different social media platforms that were available at the time, this was like 2013, I think.
Mhm.
Instagram was only one picture and you had to take it at the moment, right? So then I was like, well, no, I have many little things that I want to talk about, this particular monstera right now. So Tumblr at the time was what's called a micro blogging. So it wasn't like a full out blog where you had to go on your computer and like, upload the photo there, but rather Tumblr, it was like I could just take the pictures, 4 or 5 pictures, put them into like a little gallery thing, and
Mhm.
then just type out a little caption that was just sort of like saying, what's going on? What am I seeing? What's cool about this? What am I worried about? And that was the easiest way to keep it back then. And then I think around 2015, that's when I joined. I started putting things on Instagram. And at that point, it was really just a matter of thinking like, okay, I should expand this because I'm feeling like it's growing quite a lot, right? Then I'm not sure how many more years later, but Instagram released the ability to put video clips, 15-second video clips. And so at the time, I had already been making these time lapse videos so a time lapse video is basically you take a picture of something that doesn't move very fast at a regular interval, and then you kind of compile it together almost like a flipbook animation, right? In fact, even during this recording, if you hear a little shutter clacking, it's because I have a time lapse running and it's taking a
Oh,
picture
that's
every
so
5 minutes.
cool. That's awesome.
But things like I say that humans, we experience our moments in seconds and minutes, right? But plants, when we look at them, they just look like they're sitting still. But their moments are in fact in the span of hours, days, and maybe even weeks, right? So by doing a time lapse video, I'm compressing the hours and weeks into just a few seconds so that we can actually
Mhm.
see like what our plants doing. So some plants are, opening and closing between day and night. And then like that shutter clack was
Yeah.
watching a leaf, it's watching a leaf growing, which means I've been looking at this leaf for the past week. Um,
Oh, wow.
and so when you compress that into like just a few seconds, meaning Instagram 15-second video clip, you turn that moment into something like kind of more viral, right? So that's when I started sharing those on Instagram. I mean, very fortunate. I was at the time the only person doing that sort of thing. So it was picked up by a lot of these news outlets and it was shared a lot. And I think I can attribute my growth a lot to, making those time lapse videos.
Yeah, that is incredible. And I mean, I've seen so many of not only your videos, but other similar videos of compressing, like you said, that
Hmm.
growth and movement with the plants. And it's so beautiful to see that happen. And it kind of just expands it a little bit to be like, wow, okay, my plants are actually doing a lot
Doing
of work
things.
behind the scenes. Yeah, that
Yep.
is so cool. I'm really glad you brought up video because we've talked about this in previous episodes with other guests that video really tends to be a pain point for a lot of creators, whether that's knowing the right equipment to have, knowing how to set up a shot, or most importantly, getting in front of the camera and talking. And, from your Instagram, you are just so skilled at producing really beautiful, amazing
Oh, thank you.
video content, of course. So, what are some key things that helped you get started with video, especially with feeling more confident of like, okay, this is the kind of content I want to produce. This is how I'm going to do it, and all of that.
Hmm. Yeah, the video is an interesting topic because I mean, for time lapse, that's more like almost like a cinematography type production. Like I kind of frame it as if I'm just almost like art, right? I'm just like seeing the plant as okay, its movement is like art, so I'm going to frame it that way, right? But then we have the talking video where you talk to people, right? And I'll be honest, I wasn't always very comfortable in front of the camera because I always felt like I had to say it perfectly the first time when in fact we have to remind ourselves no, you can edit things. And even today on YouTube, people are used to seeing fast cut, like, or fast cut meaning it kind of jumpy when you can even like splice between a sentence or something, right? Like people are okay seeing that. So you kind of have to keep reminding yourself that, there's no pressure. So that was one side of it. But the other side was that I had been doing a lot of like live speaking engagements. And the weird thing is I was actually more comfortable doing that with slides than I was trying to make a video of the exact same thing. So I feel like you first have to find what you're comfortable at. Whereas, my wife, for example, is the opposite. She can talk in front of a camera easily and just kind of edit together after the fact. But for me, when I kind of freeze up in front of the camera, then I kind of, I don't know, like I get that feeling of freezing up. And I think you have to be like kind to yourself and let yourself, make those little slip ups here and there and just keep going with it, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think that's the part about being in front of the camera that is, for me, is challenging still.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really important to note too that there are so many aspects of creating video content. You don't have to be perfect at every single one. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're really skilled at setting up a flat lay for an aerial shot or something like that. But you, like you said, maybe you feel a little bit more nervous to be in front of the camera. That's okay. It's just like practice makes perfect. So I'm glad, like, it's very valuable to hear your experience with certain things like that.
Mm-hmm. I would even say, like, we don't even need to go with the notion of practice makes perfect, but maybe just practice makes good enough. Like
Yeah.
you put it out there,
Yes.
and there's a certain threshold where it's good enough. And when people are listening or watching, they know they're not there to, judge your cinematography and your video quality, right? Like
Right.
at some point they know they're there to consume the information. So as long as that comes through good enough, then you've done your job, right? And of the two things, like the things that I've really noticed is like we have the video, which is like your video camera and such, right? And then there's the audio. It's actually the audio that, if you have that really, really nice and clear, then people can forgive a lot of audio, video quality issues. So it was kind of a realization, and of course, so many YouTubers, they talk about this, right? So as you and I were both using these nice separate microphones, and when people listen to it, once the audio is nice and clear, then your video, if it's, as long as it's close to HD quality, then that's good enough. Which again, your phone can do, right?
Right, exactly. I was just going to say there's so much you can do with just your iPhone or whatever kind of smartphone you have. So that's something that we try to tell fellow creators. You can get started with just what you have already. You don't have to spend tons of money to create awesome video content. And that's something I wanted to ask you though. What kind of equipment do you use for audio, video, just content creation in general?
So, I mean, with the time lapse videos, those are special things. So, which I have like a DSLR. Actually, I have 4 Canon T4Is, which are like an older model Canon. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason I like them is because, number one, they're cheap, so I just buy all of them. They've all been like, they're just used cameras, right? But then they also have a interesting firmware hack that you can do so that I can get that, tell it to take a picture every 5 minutes kind of thing, right? Because before I used to have to have a separate remote timer to time it. But anyway, that's more specialized equipment. But in terms of content creation, like this sort of thing, or for YouTube videos or online course videos, I've really started to see that I can actually just use Zoom or whatever kind of online video conferencing and just record that, because the way that I do the courses, for example, is there's often a lot of slides that have information on it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like the quality of my picture doesn't even have to be that good. Maybe just for the opening 1 minute of introduction. So, I mean, when I did the Teachable course, I had like a separate camera on top of my webcam, which was a regular video camera, like a DSLR. And I was shooting, like looking into that for that opening 30 seconds. But then once I went into the slideshow, I was just looking, doing that with the Zoom conferencing function. That's for video. And then of course, microphone, the boom microphone. I don't know exactly which one this is. anyway, it's one of those, standard podcasting type microphones, and
Yeah.
doing it right into the computer, like in terms of USB, is super simple, because then all of the audio just gets put right into there. You don't have to do any kind of syncing like that. And then that's for recording it, and then editing. It's your standard Adobe software. Like luckily, I'm pretty comfortable with using them, so like I've been able to make use of like Premiere, After Effects, and Photoshop, and all those kinds of good programs.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that. I know it's always really great and really accessible to hear what other creators are using for their content creation. So, I really want to segue into what spurred you to start doing online courses for your business. So, you started out Tumblr, then you kind of transitioned more into a more formal blog. What was the moment that made you decide, okay, I think online courses might be for me? I'd
Hmm.
love to hear about that journey.
Sure, yeah, and well, so speaking of the journey, there's a few more steps between doing Tumblr, Instagram, and then blog.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
there's like, yeah, like all of these things. I think I just somewhat like the exercise of organizing information and conveying like the story of, here's what I do to take care of my plants. Here's how I think about light. Here's how I think about watering. And so that the love of doing that in a nice kind of understandable format led to a literary agent reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I think you can write a really good book about this." And so I said,
Wow.
"Yeah, I would love to." That was kind of my dream. When I first started the Tumblr blog, and after like 2 years of seeing all the blog posts, I was like, this would look really nice, kind of all just put
Yeah.
into like a book format, right? So that, yeah, it had been in my mind. And so it was like, just fate would have it that a literary agent came to me and asked me to, like, she helped me put together a proposal, and then we pitched it to different publishers, and eventually, I chose to work with Abrams, which is based in New York City, publisher, to publish my book. And it was, I mean, when I say publish my book, it's not as if I had written everything beforehand. So we made a proposal to say what the book would be about, which is effectively just houseplant care, right? But of course, in the way that I would like to teach it, right? So that took about a year and a half. It was a very grueling process of doing that while working full time. So evenings and weekends, writing, taking photos. I also took all the pictures for the book. So when it finally came together, it was released, and then that was when I decided, okay, I'm gonna give myself some time to like visit places and kind of like book tour kind of thing. And then it was funny that my book was released March of 2019, and then the next day after that, me and my entire 20-person team, we got laid off from our jobs because the company
Oh,
was restructuring and they were going to
yeah.
cancel the product that I was working on. So I mean, it wasn't a surprise. I knew it was coming, months in advance, but it was almost like serendipitous that it's like it
Right.
came at the time when I was like, I would really like to go on tour and meet the people who are reading my book, and people who I've been following on Instagram with the houseplant community and stuff like that. So it kind of worked out perfectly, although I was still pretty sad to leave the company, because you work with a lot of people and your friends there. But
Right.
so I was going on tour and meeting and basically talking through what's written in the book, but in a more interactive format. And I really got the hang of it, and I started liking to do that. So different nurseries across the US were starting to hire me to come and give like a kind of little weekend talk about houseplant care. And then they would sell my book, and I would sign it, and that kind of nice stuff. So clearly, when the pandemic struck in early 2020, then I had to cancel all the rest of my little trips. And I was thinking, the thing that I love most is to teach about houseplant care. But you see, there's something about, like, the natural step is, well, why don't you just put it on Instagram then? There's a kind of thing where people who want to learn they will approach you and ask you to teach, right? But if you just put it on Instagram, then it almost sounds a little soapbox and preachy, right? So, and yet, because I know that I think about all these things in very much detail, then on Instagram, I'll just put the very top level thing, right? Which is just the basic tips, as you would call it, right? But
Right.
then there's going to be people who want to understand more, or they literally just want your help more and such. So for me, it was like, well, I could direct into my book, or in a more interactive format, then an online course was kind of like the next most logical thing to produce, right? And so then I guess all the summer of 2020, I was working on the course, putting together the content, figuring out like what would be where. And then by July 2020, it was really like I'd released the Teachable course. And yeah, I was just really happy with having the two things, the book and this online course, that were kind of like complementary to each other, right? So the naturally some skeptical people are like, well, is your course just like you reading your book off? And I'm like, no, it's different because I'm talking about it, and I'm bringing the content to life. And I've come to learn that people want to consume content in different formats. So if people really, want to have a physical book, they'll get your book. If people want to have an ebook, well, the ebook is available too. If people want to watch like a long format video, like a series of you talking about your houseplants, then that's where the online course is. Whereas if people, want just your free content, but they don't mind small little bite-sized things, then, you have YouTube channel, right? So having yourself on all these different formats is sort of like giving people the most options to find you and interact with your content.
Yeah. And I think it's really lovely too to, with all those options, you're kind of hitting all those touch points to make your content and your knowledge super accessible for anyone with any kind of learning style, which is
Absolutely.
amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing about that. That's so exciting. And I love hearing all of these different stories about everyone's like unique journeys. So I'm curious, like we mentioned earlier, the plant community in particular, I think is a very strong one. People are super passionate about plants, which I'm getting there because my knowledge is very minimal at the moment. But the more I see my monstera thriving, the more excited I get and the more I want to learn.
Mhm.
So
Or the
I'm
more
just
plants you want to buy, right?
exactly that, especially. Oh, my bank account is screaming. Um, what are some things that you have done in the past and continue to do, or just new learnings that you find to keep your online community super close, on social media, with your courses, wherever your community is?
So one of the things that I think I like doing a lot is answering people's questions about houseplants, because I feel like when people try and look for answers just on Google, then they find the same few things, right? And those same few things all inevitably cause more worry than good usually. So what I've been doing, and I kind of change with different formats, is that like people can ask me questions like about their plants. They can send me a picture and those kinds of things. And then what I used to do was that there would always be a lot of follow up questions, right? Because if, for example, you see a yellowed leaf and you're wondering if it's over or underwatering, or if it's like not enough light and all these kinds of things, and you just show it to me or someone, then like Google can't ask you, well, why don't you tell me how much you're watering? Why don't
Right.
you show me where you're putting the plant? Why don't you
Exactly.
tell me how long have you had the plant? All of these things, matter a lot, right? And so at first it would just be a very ad hoc process of back and forth, email or DM or whatever. But now I've created like a more interactive survey sort of thing where I ask, or show me what you feel is wrong with your plant, but then tell me about your watering, show me your light, all the things that I, at least for me, interpret to be most impactful in how you're caring for your plant. And so by doing it this way, and then of course they have to not sign, but like basically acknowledge a disclaimer that I'm not going to use your name or anything, but I will, if I choose your question, I'll post it on my website. And having the back and forth so other people can read and understand and learn too, right? And I feel like when you share that more personal approach of basically just saying like, I hear and I see your plant issues, and here's my opinion on it, right? So doing it that way is, I think, has been good for community growing. And of course, there will be people who disagree and say like, oh no, it's this, or oh, I do it this way. And so that I think I try, and maybe I should probably do this more, but like explicitly say that like, the way you take care of your plants, there's no really right or wrong, because the purpose of owning the plant is that it's a living thing that lives with you. So you have a relationship with it. And that means that it doesn't have to look like somebody else's in order to be right. Right. It has to,
Exactly.
it's going to be your plant. It's going to grow uniquely to your space. So your job is just to give it the best possible conditions, and then accept what nature has in store, is what I sometimes say. So trying to be more, I guess, forgiving about it, and not trying to say that there's a strict right and wrong way to do things, and allowing people to do things their way. But at the same time, if they want to know like whether this spot over here is good for the plant, then if they ask, then I'll say, right. But if they don't ask and they're happy with their plant, then I won't say, right.
Yeah.
So I think the sharing of opinions is a sensitive thing that you don't want to come across as preachy, but at the same time you want to be helpful.
Definitely. I really like that you give not only that personalization to take them away from Google and to really have that one-on-one experience that eventually goes on a wider scale, right? Because you post the question on your blog, but to also allow people to kind of participate in that discourse, I think is really awesome, to open up the conversation and for other people to connect with each other. That is such a cornerstone of a strong community. So I really commend you on that, for allowing people to kind of connect with each other and talk and open up the conversation about their plants and their personal experiences with what they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about. I think at the end of the day, like houseplants are recreational activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not growing agricultural crops, because the thing is, I think a lot of plant knowledge comes from having grown, like people growing industrial scale like agricultural crops. And so we can't just like blindly apply the techniques or concerns that they might have to houseplants, because ultimately we may not need that level of number one, like quality standard, or number two, like the intensity that they need things, right? So like perfect example is grow lights, right? I think we all know that if you want to grow a certain type of plant that
Mm-hmm.
you can consume afterwards, like you need a lot of grow light power, which is the reason why they use things that are like 1,000 watt crazy bulbs like that. But
Right.
houseplant light requirements are very modest, and the technology has changed so much that it's so cheap to get like a LED light bulb or something, right? And that is strong enough for these quote unquote low light houseplants, right? If you're trying to grow vegetable, you will not be able to grow it with those lights. But these cheaper lights easily can maintain like our most beloved houseplants, Monstera, pothos, oxalis. Sorry, this may not be a very common one, but philodendrons. I'm just looking around at all my plants here,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But it's like they don't need that much light. So if we think about it from the perspective of the industry, well, then of course the industry is going to tell you, oh, well, you need maximum amount of light. But from a house plant owner recreational standpoint, standard LED lights are enough. And so trying to help people understand, what is enough for your plants is something that I'm trying to do, because otherwise the market may always feel like you don't have enough, right?
Yes, yes, definitely. I think that that approach is so great because it kind of levels the playing field in a way of
Mm-hmm.
anyone can own plants, anyone can tend to them, and like it is an accessible thing to do, an accessible recreational activity that anyone can find joy from. So I really appreciate the fact that you do that.
Yeah. It's something that I think when we all can find the joy and what makes you happy about watching a plant grow, then that can be attained with any plant. It doesn't have to be quote unquote rare plants, which is a kind of trend going on now. It doesn't have to be those types of plants, it's like any plant that is doing well will make you feel good, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
matter if it's common pothos that you can find, for $3 or something, a small pot at any store. But like just watching it grow and thrive in itself is such a joy. And it's something that I think, needs to be shared that way so that people can derive that feeling of connecting with nature and feeling of proud of themselves for nurturing something to grow well. Like that can be achieved with any plant. So it's something that, yeah, I'm really focusing on and trying to help people understand.
That's so great. I love it so much. I would love to know, when you started and launched the online courses, what about that kind of made certain parts of your business and brand a little bit more seamless?
Yeah, I think because, for myself, I knew that I enjoyed the teaching aspect a lot, right? I mean, and of course, pandemic, because I wasn't going out to doing these events, then having the online course in my kind of arsenal of tools that I can have in terms of what's representing my brand, then it, I know this is a kind of a maybe unique situation, but like if you have 500,000 followers, I get a few hundred DMs a week about what's wrong with my plant, right?
Right, right.
So first of all, having that survey thing where I can say, okay, look, if you want me to take a look, then here, fill out these forms and submit the pictures here, and then here's where, like, when I have time, then I can like take a look at it and maybe publish one of the things, right? And then second to that is, and if you're interested to learn more, here's a really thorough online course. And I think a lot of times, people are hungry to consume something that's been well put together. Like they don't just want little tips and tricks. They want like a foundation knowledge so that they can feel confident when they go and pursue the hobby of houseplants. And I think that applies to almost any skill that's out there, which is why having that online course is just such a great thing to have in your toolkit, right?
Definitely. Definitely. I love that. And this is actually a question that I ask everyone. I just love every answer is of course different. So, if you're starting a business today, or if you were just getting started, what would you do in the first month or two?
Hmm. I think building the audience is like, I mean, okay, we're assuming that if I started from ground zero where
Yes,
nothing
like
existed, right?
brand new
Brand new.
entrepreneur.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
um, Building the audience is super important, and it's so much easier than it was in the past because you have so many different forms of social media. Then it's a matter of you understanding which ones your target customer is on,
Mhm.
and speak to them in the way that would appeal to them, right? And for whatever service or product that you have, then you have to almost like, well, first of all, it would help that if you yourself do the thing that you're selling or talking about, right? So clearly for me, I did this thing before I started selling a book or a course and all that, right? So then you already have some understanding about what people might be looking for, right? So the whole marketing research and building the audience is like the first two things, I guess you could say, that I would really look into. And then the next would be, which I kind of regret not getting help earlier, is like having a good online presence, not only from social media, but just your own website, right?
Mm,
Having a
mhm.
good website, when people land, it's like they're already starting to, in some ways, judge you, right? So, put your best foot forward. There are good templates if you're on a smaller budget, but if you can afford to hire somebody to talk them through what you want your brand to look like, I think that's something that really can uplift and differentiate your brand. So for me personally, I use the template and kind of put it together myself. I often thought about this like sort of, I'm not a professional chef, so that means I couldn't put together a meal that is really, really good just with my own skill, right? So I'd rather talk to somebody who knows how to do the putting together, but then convey to them, oh, I'm about this. I like these things. I think my customer likes these. This is my style. I like casual style, or I like more formalized style. Like you can convey all these things to them, and then they can put together the meal, so to speak, in a way that reflects you best. So getting the help with that is the thing I would do within the first 2 months of having a brand new business.
Oh, that is so valuable. Thank you so much for sharing. And kind of going off of that, with putting yourself in the shoes of someone who is a new creator, a new entrepreneur, what tips would you have for people who are just getting started, who want to like put themselves out there and they want to pursue sharing their knowledge about something they're passionate about with other people, but they don't know where to begin? Maybe they don't feel like they have the confidence to get started. What would you tell them?
Hmm. I think it has to start with you understanding what format of communication you're best at, right? Because ultimately, all of this is just at the heart of it is communicating your ideas, right? So, for me, I liked my university experience, and I liked attending lectures. Kind of nerdy, but whatever. But like, I liked the idea of putting together slides and then having a speaker speak through it. So that's for me like the format that I felt like I was best at. But for others, maybe it's freely talking in front of a camera, right? And so then YouTube would be your kind of go-to thing. But of course, because all of the social media has video, you can pretty much do that on any format, right?
Right.
And so first of all, understanding that, but then to sort of balance that, you also need to remember, or at least get a sense of, what format does your audience most connect with you with, right? And this is something that I'm still working on, which is that whenever I put my face in front of the camera and speak, that inevitably connects with people more than just reading things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are people who connect with the reading as well, but it's like, because maybe what you write is compelling. But that's why I say you have to understand for like what you're good at, right? So for me, I'm better at writing things, so then I try and make my connection through the writing. But if you're better at communicating just by talking, then do it that way, and kind of like push harder with that. So find the way that you like to communicate, but also try and cater it to how your audience wants to hear it, or see it, or read it, whatever, right? And then as you go through that, this is almost sounds like just like life lessons, right? But like,
This is great.
don't
This
look
is
at
perfect.
other people's, don't assume other people's success. Like when you look at them and you think that they're X certain level of success, like don't assume that, because they're internally going through their own struggles that you're probably feeling too. So yeah, the idea is kind of like you understand yourself, you think about what your audience likes, and then when you push forward with your content, you have to remember that you'll win people over, not just based on your quote unquote quality of your content, but just your personality has a lot to do with it, right? So it's like, I can consume the same informational content from two different people, but if I just connect with one person more, then I would go with them, right? And so realizing that, I mean, even for me, thinking of plant influencers or other things like that, I look at us more like the music industry, right? There's no one correct or best musician. You just follow and listen to whoever you like.
Right.
And then I think even from the musician side, they are not thinking, oh, I have to make the best song ever. Like, it's like they produce on a regular basis, and they understand they're producing in a community of artists. So the same way, I'm making my plant content in a community of people who are making plant content. So that means I don't care if you like this person's way of saying, talking about watering or light better than me, because then somebody else can have the opposite thing, which is they prefer the way I talk about it versus someone else. So it always boils down to some kind of cliche, which is like, when you be yourself, you do it the way that you enjoy, then the audience who likes it that way will come to you.
Exactly. No, I don't think that's cliche at all. I think that is universally just amazing advice to know that if you're being authentic and being true, staying true to yourself, you're going to attract the right audience that's meant to be in your
Mhm.
world. And that's the
And,
kind of that's who you want anyway, you know?
exactly. And I think also that just for yourself too, like if you're constantly trying to do something that you don't feel like is you, then that's like the fastest way to burn out, right?
Right.
But I mean, even for me, when I started with Instagram, taking pictures of plants, I thought, wow, I don't like, some bloggers, they have, if you're a travel blogger and you take pictures because of traveling, it means you actually have to go to that place to take the pictures, right? And I was
Right.
thinking, wow, I'm having it pretty good as a plant blogger because then everything is just right in my own home. My models don't move, and they do whatever I ask them to, or position them to do. So in a sense, depending on the industry you're in, like you need to find the most sustainable way, I guess, to create your content, and one that energizes you, which is the reason why I say do it in the way that you like it, so that way, like I like taking pictures of my plants here and there, and I like doing the time lapses, so they don't take up my energy to do it. In fact, it gives me energy to do the time lapse and take
Right.
pictures of the ways that I do it.
Right. Because you know that when you eventually move on to post it on Instagram, your audience is going to respond so well. And they're going to be so excited because they were drawn to you for a reason.
For sure.
Yes. Ah, amazing. I love it. So where can, Darryl, where can people connect with you or learn more about Houseplant Journal and just everything, all the amazing things that you have going on?
So houseplantjournal.com is my website, and that's where I post like longer blog articles. But on Instagram, I'm Houseplant Journal. It's all one word, no spaces or underscores or anything like that. Yeah, and that's where on like more on a daily basis I'll post. I guess it's still the journal of my houseplants, right? So you're just going to see updates on how my plants are doing, and I think that's the thing that's the reason for the boom in the Instagram plant blogging is because people don't, especially with pandemic, they don't get to come to your house and see your plants. So when you share it outwards, then in some ways you live vicariously through somebody else's experience with that particular plant, or sometimes it gives you the idea that, oh, I want that one, and then you try and find your own, right?
Right.
Which is sort of like, I guess, fueling people's spending on the plants. But anyway,
Worth it.
yeah. But the point is, like, it's something special that social media is doing with houseplants, and I think generally that's pretty good. So for me, Houseplant Journal, that's where you can find me. Instagram, and I also have a YouTube channel. Trying to put out some more videos, but right now I'm focusing more on my online course, which is called Essentials of Houseplant Enjoyment. And I think one thing that I should note about it is, like, it's got a lot of your standard video type lecture material, but what I like to do is roughly on a monthly basis I have a Zoom call with students, whoever can join, and then I'll usually talk like a little bit about some particular hot topic of plants, and then also answer their questions, like sort of like this, like right in front of them, right?
Right.
And sometimes I'll bring in material from the course and talk about it there. And overall, that whole video gets put back into the course, so people can rewatch all of these what I call office hour sessions, and it's sort of like just to enrich what's already in the course. And I think that's something that people might find valuable, and also that I enjoy doing.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure that everyone who's listening right now is going to be so excited to follow you and stay connected. So thank you for doing that. And I have personally been so inspired by everything you've shared today. So before we hop off, I'd love to know if you have any last words of wisdom or inspiration for our listeners.
I think my approach to plant care has often been, some people have commented that it can be approached to life even, right? And so the approach is like three parts. The first is you understand your environmental conditions. So these are the things that are set in place that you can't really control to some degree, right? Then the second part is to just try your best well, in my way, I say try your best with plant care, but you can just say try your best, give your best effort so that you yourself can say, I gave it my best effort. And the last piece is to let nature take its course. And that means that the outcome that happens is never going to be completely in your control. You have some control, that's the effort part of it. But there's also the environment part, which is the settings. And lastly, just whatever you're doing that is organic in nature, whether it be building a business, growing a plant, the things that will happen, some will be good, some will be not so good. But the point is you have to keep going with it, or you have to decide, whether it's time to stop. I mean, let's keep it on a positive note, but like when you let nature take its course, then it's easier to be so-called roll with the punches, right? So I think having that 3 kind of step approach, understand your environment, give it your best effort, and let nature take its course. That's sort of the way I would like to, help people with their business.
Truly, what an amazing way to cap off that episode. I am very, very excited for this to be in the world. Darryl, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all of your amazing wisdom and insights. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks. It was wonderful. Thank you very much.
This podcast is produced by Teachable, your go-to platform for course creation. Since 2014, we've helped more than 100,000 creators earn over $1 billion from online courses and coaching products. How do we do it? By managing all the logistics like coding and payment processing to make it easier than ever for you to share your knowledge online. To learn more, visit teachable.com.